Welcome back everyone. Today we're making a crossbody phone purse. The finished bag measures in at 5 by 8 with a 3-inch depth, making it a perfect phone carrying case. The bag's gonna include 3 pockets and also pockets on the inside for your cards. And this project is on the easier side, so if you are new to sewing, you should be totally fine. And with all that being said, if you're new to the channel, grab that printable pattern and let's get started. Getting started with supplies, you're going to want to grab yourself a 1/4 yard for your main fabric, and I recommend using a canvas, denim, or twill. These are all really nice durable fabrics that are easy to work with. I'm going to be using a heavier weight denim and a little piece of Sherpa for the front panel. Realistically, any fabric will work with this pattern, so definitely use whatever fabric that's really going to pull out your design. You'll also need a 1/4 yard for your secondary fabric, and I recommend using a lighter weight fabric. This is going to be for the lining. We're going to be adding multiple layers together, so using a nice lighter weight nylon or cotton will really work perfectly with this pattern. You'll need 1 8-inch zipper and 2 10-inch zippers, and I'm going to be using a zipper roll. This is a great way to cut precise zippers without wasting any material. You'll need 2 yards of 1-inch webbing, and this is going to be for the strap. If you want to make a wider strap, you can totally get a bigger width webbing, but if you decide to change the width of the webbing, you'll also have to change the width of your hardware. So going along with that 1-inch width webbing, you'll need 2 lobster clasps and 1 strap slider. Since I'm using 1-inch width webbing, I'm going to have 1-inch width hardware. You'll need 2 1/2-inch width D-rings. Going along with the D-rings, you're going to need strap, and you can either use 1/2-inch width strap or cut leather strips. This is going to hold the D-ring onto the bag, so feel free to use whatever method that works best for you. You'll need a 1/4 yard of a 1/4 inch foam. We'll be using this to pad the bag, so this feature is totally optional. And lastly, you'll need your pattern. This pattern is available at properfitclothing.com. It's super easy to use. All you have to do is download it, print it off, tape it together, and you're ready to go. And once you have all your supplies gathered and your pattern printed out, it's time to move into cutting.
And after printing out your pattern, you're going to want to cut on the outside of the black line. Cut the pattern out and you should end up with 2 front pocket side panels, 1 cut out of your main fabric and 1 cut out of your lining. 4 main pocket side panels, 2 cut out of your main fabric and 2 cut out of your lining. 4 inside card pocket panels, all cut out of your lining. 2 front pocket panels, 1 cut out of your main fabric and 1 cut out of your lining. 5 main panels, 2 cut out of your main fabric and 3 cut out of your lining. Moving on to construction, we're going to start by grabbing the inside card pocket panels, marking the pocket hem guides on all of the panels, fold at the marked lines to end up with a nice clean inside edge. Repeat this process for all of the panels. With all of the panels pinned, we're going to stitch directly on that hemmed edge. Repeat the stitch for all of the other panels and try to keep them as even as possible. Grab the main panels and we're going to start with just one of the lining panels. And we're going to place the inside pocket panels using the pattern as a guide. Place the first one just below the curved edges of the lining, and then each one after will be staggered on the placement guide. Leave the first one on and we're going to stitch the bottom edge directly on top of our previous stitch. Grab your second inside pocket, place it on the placement guide, make sure the side edges are lined up perfectly, and we're going to stitch it just like the first one on the bottom edge. Place the third one on and repeat this process all the way down to the 4th panel. After stitching your 4th inside pocket, just double check to make sure all the pockets are lined up correctly, and from here we're going to secure them down by stitching the outside edges. And this stitch is just to hold it down, so stitch as close as you can to that outside edge. And this is going to be the final size of the pocket. Go ahead and give it a try if you need to. From here, place it off to the side and grab the rest of your main panels. The next step is optional. We're going to be placing a foam insert in between the panels for a little bit of protection. Place it on the wrong side of the lining panel. And you're going to want to make sure your foam insert has plenty of room from the outside edge. From here, place the wrong sides together, sandwiching the insert in between both of the panels. From here, we're going to stitch all the way around the outside edge as close as we can to that edge. And we're combining these 2 panels into one to make it easier to construct in later steps. After stitching, just do a double check, make sure all the layers got sewn together and that the foam insert is not sewn into the edge. If everything checks out, you can place these panels off to the side. Grab your front pocket panels and we're going to repeat the same process. Cut a foam insert smaller than the sides of the panel, place it in the center of the panel, place the wrong sides of the panel together, sandwiching the insert in between both of the panels, and stitch around the outside edge as close as you can to that edge. Same goes for this panel, double check to make sure the foam insert is still centered, and you can place this panel off to the side. The next step is also optional. We're going to be placing an eyelet on the back main panel. Cut out the eyelet guide on the panel, place it on our pattern, and chalk it out. Cut a hole big enough for the size eyelet you're using. Grab the front side of your eyelet, place the eyelet into the hole, slide the back over the back of the eyelet. And I'm going to be using a hammer die. Feel free to use a hammer die, pliers, or even a press. And this is a super simple way to add a headphone wire port to your bag. Place the panel off to the side and grab your front pocket side panels. Lay both of the panels out with right sides up, grab your 8-inch zipper, and the zipper has to be 8-inch. Place the right side of the zipper on the right side of your main fabric. Place the right side of the lining on top of the zipper and stitch the edge at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. After stitching, flip both of the panels wrong sides together. Move the zipper train to the inside of the zipper. Grab the opposite end of the main fabric and place right sides together. And repeat this for the lining on the opposite side. With all the layers together, stitch at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Make sure you have nice tight stitches along the zipper tracks. And from here, we're going to add top stitches to both of those new edges. And sometimes it's best to hand crank over the zipper to avoid breaking a needle. After top stitching, we're going to repeat this process for the main pocket side panels. Lay all of your side panels out, grab your 10-inch zipper, and again, this has to be 10 inches. It's very important to have the correct size zipper. Place the right sides together, sandwiching the zipper. In between the main fabric and lining, stitch at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Line up the opposite end of the panel with the opposite end of the zipper. Place the right sides together, lining up the zipper end and the panel end. Stitch at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And after completing both of the panels, we're going to add a top stitch to all of the new edges. And again, take caution going over the zipper. Sometimes it's best just to hand crank. And after top stitching, that's going to complete all of our side panels. Grab the complete front pocket panel, mark the centers on the bottom and the top. Grab the complete front pocket side panel and do the same. Mark the center on the bottom panel and the zipper. At this point, you're going to decide what side you want the zipper on, so you're going to want to keep this consistent throughout the bag. When you have that decided, place the right sides together, lining up the centers on the zipper panel and the pocket panel. From here, we're going to stitch all the way around the outside edge at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. This is the front of the bag, so you really want to make sure you have this centered and you sew it really nice around the edges so those edges pop. If it's not good the first time, totally de-thread it and try it again. It takes practice really getting this looking nice. And I always like to double check to make sure that all the layers got sewn together since we're working with multiple layers. If everything is looking good, we're going to flip it around so that the wrong side is back out. And I'm going to walk you through a few different ways to cover up that raw edge on the inside. We're going to be adding bias tape using a few different methods, and hopefully one of these methods will work for you. The first method is using a bias tape making kit, and this is where you make your own bias tape. It's super simple to do. You cut your bias tape strips, feed it through your folder, and press it as it's coming out your folder. And by picking this method, you get to choose the size and also the color of fabric to match your project. The second method is using a double fold bias tape binder. You install this to your machine and it gives you the ability to sew directly onto your garment. It's a very fast and effective technique. The third technique is using pre-made bias tape. This technique, you're very limited to colors, but it's easy to do. You just fold it over your edge and stitch it down. This is a great way to go if you don't have a lot of tools to work with. And I'm going to be stitching mine on using the double fold bias tape attachment. By far, this is the most effective technique. You can really use any color of fabric you want that matches your bag, and it's very quick. But like always, use whatever technique that works best for you. Either way, I do recommend adding bias tape. It's really going to make those inside edges pop and overall make for a stronger, more quality bag. Moving on, grab your main panels, and we're going to start with the front panel, so place your back panel off to the side. Using the pattern, we're going to mark out the front pocket placement guide on the main fabric. Grab your complete front pocket, and what we're going to do is mark the center on both the top and the bottom, and we're going to line that up to make sure it's lined up with the bottom of our front panel. Once you have it lined up, we're going to flip the right side of our zipper, lining it up with the right side of our main fabric. Pin the pocket down so the zipper goes across the entire main panel and stitch at a 1/4-inch seam allowance. It's best to try to stitch directly on that line, and after stitching, flip the pocket down, make sure the edges line up and the side pocket lines up with the side edges of the main panel. Pin all those edges into place. And if everything lines up after pinning, we're going to stitch as close as we can to the outside edge, locking all these layers together. And since this bag is on the smaller side, it can be pretty tricky, so just take your time going around the corners and try to make it as neat as possible. Do a quick check to make sure all the layers got sewn together, and from here you can place this complete front main panel off to the side. Grab one of your complete side panels, mark the centers, grab the main panel lining with the card pockets, and we're going to place the zipper on that lining. Since this is a bag divider, we're not placing the right sides together, and make sure we have the zipper going in the correct direction. Place the right side of the lining to the wrong side of the zipper and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you really want to take the time to make sure you have this lined up correctly in the center of the panel, because we're going to be adding another one of these side panels and you want the zippers to line up. And like always, after stitching, just double check to make sure all the layers got stitched together. Place the panel off to the side and grab our main back panel. Grab the other complete main side panel, mark the centers. And since this is the back panel, we're going to use the divider to reference to make sure we have the zipper going in the correct direction. So I lined it up with the main fabric pointing down, and from here I can find what side of the zipper to use and place the right side of the fabric to the right side of the zipper. Make sure to line the centers up and stitch all the way around the outside edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, take your time, make sure you have it centered as good as possible, and once you're finished, make sure all the layers are sewn together and the corners are looking nice. Grab the pattern piece and we're going to mark out our D-ring placement. And we're going to be placing these on the outside edge of the zipper, so do your best to line it up. Grab your D-rings and whatever you're going to hold them with. I'm using little leather straps. Place them on your placement. I'm letting mine hang out about 1/2 inch on both sides. And feel free to use webbing or whatever other material that can hold the D-ring. From here, stitch them down. And this is just going to hold them into place so it's easier to sew the next panel on. And we're going to continue with the back panel. Place it down, grab the complete divider section, make sure the right sides are pointing out, and we're going to place it on the inside of our complete back section. Line up the panels using the centers on the top and the bottom, and we're going to stitch all the way around the outside edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. With each section, it gets a little bit harder because we're adding more layers on and we have to coordinate all those layers and keep them centered, so just take your time, and if you have to de-stitch, that's totally fine. After completing the stitch, you can snip your webbing or your leather flush with the seam allowance. Double check on the inside to make sure all the layers, flip the right sides out, and check on the outside, make sure all the layers are looking good and everything's centered. And if everything's looking good, we're going to flip back to the inside and add bias tape to both of our inside raw edges. And I will say again, adding the bias tape really takes this bag to the next level. So if you added it or if you choose to skip it, flip the right sides back out and pop out the main side panel connected to the divider. Grab the complete front panel assembly, mark the centers on both top and bottom, and we're going to line it up and pin it to the side panel that's connected to the divider. And this is going to be the hardest one because you don't have a lot of room to work with. You really have to push that front panel down, line up the side panel, and then once you have it lined up and pinned together, stitch around the outside edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like the previous step, take your time and de-thread if you need to. After stitching, we're going to double check all the layers, and if they're looking good, add the bias tape to that inside edge and flip the right sides out. From here, you can add your branding, your zipper pulls, or anything else you might need to add as a detailed touch. Place it off to the side and grab 2 yards of 1-inch webbing. The last step is making the strap, so grab your strap slider, slide it onto one end of your webbing, pull it down the strap about 1 foot to 1.5 feet, grab one of your lobster clasps, slide it onto the same end of that webbing. With the lobster clasp on, we're going to feed a little slack into the slider, grab the webbing end and feed it back through the slider from the outside opening, back through the inside opening. And this is going to be from the underside of the slider. Pull the end out, giving you enough space to stitch the webbing end down. I'm going to be using a zigzag stitch along that entire edge. This is going to cover up any fraying and make for a nice tight strap. With one side of the strap complete, we're going to move over to the opposite end. Grab one more lobster clasp, feed it onto the opposite end of the webbing, roll the webbing end over twice, making for a nice neat edge, and stitch that edge. I like to do a nice tack stitch, a few back and forth to really secure the strap down. The last step is to clip the strap to your bag. With the strap clipped on, go ahead, try it on, adjust the strap to your measurements, and if it's too small or too big, you can always make a totally new strap using less or more webbing.
And there you have it, your crossbody purse phone bag is complete. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Hopefully your bags turned out awesome. This bag is on the trickier side just because it's smaller. It's harder to work around the corners once you start stacking those layers on. But just like anything, the more you make this bag or any bag, the better they will start looking. And like always, if you ever have any questions, definitely comment down below or send me a message. I'm gonna keep the videos coming at you, so I'll see you next time.